I think building strength and endurance in the gym or with physical activity has a ton of carryover into the rest of your life and can create a massive momentum effect that nutrition naturally follows. I think it creates some physical and mental resiliency that then some type of meditation or just general self-awareness practice, whether that might be journaling, taking a walk, sitting down and just reflecting on how you feel and like doing some emotional identification once in a while. The domino effect of exercise on the rest of those can be really powerful.
Let's rock. Welcome back to the Pure Ambition Podcast. Today's episode is focused on how to achieve optimal wellness through nutrition, movement, and mindset with my guest, Jason Loebig. Jason's the co-founder of Live Better Co., Nike Plus Run Club coach, and performance coach. You'll be able to walk away from this conversation and immediately apply the practical insight and knowledge to your life to live your best day ever, every single day, forever. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more conversations like this that will help you amplify your health, happiness, and quality of life. Now let's dive into it. What was that like for you having to up and leave Chicago and, your business and everything that you've got going on there and just completely go across the country, across the world,
Yeah,
rather?
yeah. I think it was interesting. The training business, my one-on-one business, is the most difficult. Leaving behind clients, that's the toughest thing to do remotely. I had a lot of practice because of COVID. I think 90% of the one-on-one training clients that I had from pre-COVID still trained virtually all through COVID. So Brett and I, actually just never slowed down. I think I got busier during COVID with just the amount of digital things we were doing consistently. So I've had some pretty good practice doing virtual sessions, and a lot of my clients already program with me remotely. So we do a combination of in person and me handling a lot of their schedule. And thankfully, most of that continued while I was over here. So I could still do that. I was still planning retreats from here. I was home all of March running two of our weekend domestic retreats. But it was a little scary. I think you maybe don't take for granted, but you maybe don't realize how much you rely when you work in health and wellness, especially in fitness, on the places you go to for happiness and connection and relationships. And we have so many touch points every single day, from going from one client to the next, going from one meeting to the next, that you almost take for granted the amount of like human interaction and friction you have in a normal day with people that you know or people that you recognize. And when you come all the way over here, you just basically are restarting that. So thankfully, Bondi Beach is where we're living inside Sydney, is like a fitness mecca. I mean, the beach, even though it's pitch black outside right now at 6:12 a.m., is probably packed with people, even though it's 58, 55 degrees out. It's probably packed with people being active. The path is full of runners. People are just up early here and they really like connecting around fitness. So that made it a lot easier to just transition into a place where I could go find friends and relationships very easily and comfortably. That I think made the transition just professionally something to like look forward to and something to rely on every time we're back here. That has been an unbelievable experience, but definitely really challenging leaving stuff at home that you're building and that you have momentum with, but also considering at the same time like it's a pretty cool opportunity for my wife and I just to pack up and move across the world and have these experiences together. Like that's been has trumped any type of difficulty I could tell you about professionally.
Yeah. So taking a step back there with Live Better, with your online training, with multitude of things that you've got your hand in, what came first?
Just in terms of where we started.
In terms of you, in terms of like how
Yeah.
you got into the health and wellness space and kind of the evolution of Live Better, you being a coach, being a Nike coach, all the things you have going on, where was like the origin of that?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap to that story, where things are kind of were built concurrently, but the start was Brett and I having a conversation after reconnecting a few years out of college. Brett had a couple projects he was working on, one, namely a protein bar that he had been developing for a while he was living in Milwaukee. And he was telling me that he was personal training at a Gold's Gym on the side while he was working his corporate job. And I thought, well, that sounds sort of like a fun side passion. And even 7 years ago, this was before everybody had a side hustle. This was pre, everyone having their blog. Well, maybe a lot of people had blogs, but before people were starting podcast channels while they were doing this and had side hustles while they were at corporate jobs, which I think is awesome. But this dated that very buzzy trend. So we were being a little hush about um, training and meeting and doing these things, but I had found that to be a really interesting outlet for my interest in health and wellness. And I was already trying to take care of myself while I was at my corporate career. So I actually started as a tax consultant. I have a CPA. That was career number one. And while I was at that job, Brett and I were starting to meet on this protein bar. And that was kind of the origin. Brett was like the first, like, really good push to get into health and wellness because we started talking about this protein bar. Another relationship that I had pushed me to start to explore training a lot more and plugged me into doing some group exercise and helping out on the side after I had got my personal training certification, and gave me the confidence just to be like, hey, charge a client and see where that takes you. Just see if you like doing it on the side. So I picked up a couple clients, all people I knew, and Brett and I were working on this protein bar. And so those two businesses started sort of building at the same time. I started picking up a couple more clients. People in my building that I lived in started noticing that I was training and asked me, how much I charged and like what my philosophies were. And so that training business just picks up steam. I think for any aspiring personal trainer, everybody wants a ton of clients at first, and I think should just focus on the 1 to 3 that they can get really easily, do an amazing job for that, and just let that word of mouth referral trickle out while they let that business build, because it will build if you do a good job. I think that business is just about outlasting other people, doing a great job and just kind of digging in, and eventually you will have plenty to eat. On the Live Better side, it was a little bit more of a winding road. We started with this protein bar, started making a bunch of amazing connections that turned into a podcast. We were like, we need to be recording these conversations that we're having with people way out of our league in terms of experience and knowledge in the space. We got some pretty great training mentors and got plugged into some great projects. One of them being Nike Training, like the early version, free app. This was almost, we got plugged in during the transition from NTC as a women's training gathering space to what it is now, where Nike Training is a massive vertical of Nike. You have Nike training specific athletes like Matt Frazier. This was predated any of that programming, to be brought in to do these like special events. So we happened to catch this wave of a lot of really cool things going on in Chicago, got involved with a lot of amazing mentors and just brilliant training minds that happened to be right in our backyard. And Brett and I then went back into these corporate environments, which we left, and started teaching all the things that we were learning, combined with the things anecdotally we already knew worked. So when I was taking care of myself at my professional services firm, other people were asking me questions about it, or were asking to go for runs together. And we just started doing things a little bit different. I started realizing I really liked having a coaching hat on. And that kind of pushed me to develop these kind of two careers that are headed in the same direction with training and Live Better. And those have just kind of continued to run side by side for both Brett and I, all 7 full years that we've been doing this now, which is awesome.
So how does a protein bar concept turn into this freaking massive, awesome retreat that you guys have put together?
Yeah, the retreats were always our pipe dream for what we wanted to do. And actually, I think one of the most fun sort of side stories that I came back around and realized is I put that idea out into the universe in college. One of my best friends and I used to talk about what our dream jobs were. He was my fraternity brother and roommate sophomore year. um, T Mikes, if you're listening to this, it was you. We were having a conversation one day that turned into many since then. And we were exchanging ideas on what our dream job was. And my dream job at the time, even though I was studying accountancy, this is the furthest thing away from this, was to provide an alternative to the normal therapy model, where instead of going into this clinical setting and sitting down and having this relationship with your therapist be very passive, it was to send people out into nature, combine risk kind of a risk involved activity out in nature with this alternative therapy idea of doing the therapy session while you're being active in nature. To me, I was always happiest outside and active. And I was noticing that a lot of people would open up, would share more, would be more vulnerable, while at the same time being able to build confidence and strength while you're doing these active things. That could be the gym, that could be surfing, snowboarding, mountain biking, all these things that I've loved to do for quite some time. And it was just this funny thing that always kind of stuck in my mind, because then when Brett and I started Live Better and I started my training business, we began to add a lot of different elements to what we were offering. So first it started with personal training. Then I got my yoga 200 hour. Then we went through some meditation and performance breathwork stuff. I've since stacked some speed and agility work. I'm actually currently studying for another cert now to nutrition. I have a precision nutrition level 1 to all kinds of different training modalities. I've been interested in things like MMA and gymnastics. I have more workout hobbies than anyone you know. And that was being developed at the same time that we were going back into these corporate environments where we started with this protein bar. We were delivering the protein bars into these offices. And then also, they were asking if we could do like a lunch and learn or a talk. And we said, well, what do we want to do this talk on? Because it's probably inappropriate to go back into these places and be like, you guys should quit your job and follow your dream job and leave this environment. We know you don't like working in. And that quickly turned into, well, the appropriate delivery is actually how can you optimize your health while you work in inherently stressful environments? That's at least something that all of these corporate environments would concede is, yeah, you know what? If you have a high paying job and your clients matter to you and you do things that matter or that carry gravity, like your job will be stressful. And it's okay to admit that. What's not okay is to not address it. And we were using all these things that we were learning over here about the way exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress management, just in general, play this part in holistic health. We were applying that to one on one clients. We were applying that to corporate clients. We were applying that to whatever audience we got to teach to. And Brett and I have both taught classes in hotels, at fitness festivals, to pro athletes, to kindergartners. My oldest client's 84. We're starting to thread these themes of, okay, this is not just workout and your lengthy list of personal challenges will be solved. It might be the domino effect for you to address these other areas, but they still need to be addressed. And we realized, okay, well, we actually have a pretty good shot at making a very unique experience to wrap up all of these things that we're doing. So, how do we get a client that takes 6 months of pretty consistent work, constant conversation to work through this progression from all I want to do is focus on my abs and my biceps to here's what health and wellness holistically can do for my life, for my relationships, for my output, for me as a human being. And we realized that there was an acceleration between A and B with a very concentrated, deep trip. We've never been very niche about the trip itself. They're not just fitness retreats. It's not just surf and yoga. You don't come down to just party and there happens to be a retreat going on. It's truly like all levels. It's truly welcoming for, we've had an 18-year-old to a 64-year-old on these trips. And I think that's kind of broadly representative of the one-on-one training and the groups that we have talked to, because we attract this similar mindset, but wide demographic of people. And we got a unique opportunity to go down to El Salvador as travel agents for one of Brett's clients, and have since run 12 retreats. This will be our ninth retreat in the location that we're going to back to El Salvador this November. And they've just evolved as we've kind of evolved, right? It's like, well, the protein bar was first, but that opened an avenue to have so many of these conversations prompt our learning. We would certify around that, gain a lot more experience, and then just distill down a lot of those lessons and share them. Well, when you have lessons from fitness to nutrition to sleep to stress, the thread underneath that, if you want to build a great experience, is community. And we had a bunch of experience doing that in Barry's hotels, at these fitness festivals, at teaching one-off corporate classes that we were doing. And the retreats were just this natural, like, wow, this is so obvious that we need to be doing this. And then I had a really cool moment of reflection a couple of years ago being like, oh, that was pretty close to the dream job idea that I dropped in college. I'm not a clinical MD, but as close as you can get to some of these like coaching sessions and life moments where people can share that with me and share that with each other. I was just like sitting out on the water being like, oh yeah, this is something I put out like 10 years ago and it's coming true. It's just kind of a cool full circle moment on actualizing on the things that kind of deep down. I think you always sort of find your way back to those things.
Mm. So it sounds like even though you were going down that path to become a CPA, and I mean, you did go down that path and you did, work in the corporate world for a while, but it sounds like there was always something within you that wanted to do something else, that felt like you were being called to do something else. And it also sounds like health and wellness was always kind of at the forefront of that, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health in general. So as you were going through that, getting your CPA, going into the corporate world, working that job, did you ever think before that time with Brett that you were going to kind of plan your escape out of it, or were you just planning to stay on that path?
I think that I always knew I wanted to do something either on my own or in a really small dynamic environment. And that just happened to come up at a really good time. And I, in hindsight, just kind of correctly followed my intuition about pursuing an opportunity. But I think it would be a lie for any entrepreneur to, and I'm always hesitant to use that term because it's not a job title, unless you have like 4 or 5 starts and exits to a business. But I think if you have entrepreneurial thoughts, that it would be a lie to say, oh, I always knew that this was going to be a thing for me. I always knew I was going to train and coach and that this was going to be it. You you get opportunities presented and you either action on them or you don't. Sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes it's a bad idea. the good ideas end up being good because you take action on them and you apply a consistent effort over a very long period of time around good people, and you don't stop. And whatever you continuously give energy to like that is going to grow. Everybody that has these entrepreneurial thoughts is going to get that little intuition tingle in their belly about a couple things. A few of those things are just your general excitement, but the ones that you keep circling back to over and over, those are the ones that you can be sure of having a bit more conviction about. And I think that the world just kind of reminds you of those things. And maybe it's just, oh, I see a green beetle and now a green bug car and now I'm seeing them everywhere, right? I think it's a little bit less of that phenomenon and more you just continuously putting yourself in an environment where you're being reminded that it's something that you want to do. For training specifically, maybe you're spending time around coaches and just you find yourself asking these questions and you're going home and writing down some programming stuff and looking up videos and educating yourself. That I think I was doing all of those things very early on, way before I ever decided to go full time into it. That was something that I kept circling back to. And when the opportunity presented itself to apply more time to it, I just said yes and just started to spend more time on it. And that's what's grown, because not a day has gone by in over 7 years that I've been thinking about that in some way, shape, or form, or working on that in some way, shape, or form.
What were some of those things? I'm curious. What were some of those things that you were teaching the corporate people, these high performers in business? What were you teaching them during those lunch and learns? And, ultimately, what were you trying to get across to them?
There's a concept we've been teaching on our retreats almost since day one, since a few retreats in, called Ikigai. And it's picking up a little bit more steam now as everybody is talking more about lifestyle design. Early on, this was an extremely novel concept. So just to pull all the way back to the beginning, what really spurred interest in this, and credit to him for probably doing this like 50 million separate times, but I happened to come across The 4 Hour Body by Tim Ferriss, and I had not yet read 4 Hour Work Week. And Tim now, it's a billion downloads, billion plus downloads on his podcast. That was a self-discovery. Nobody told me about Tim. His podcast wasn't shared with me. I literally was in a Barnes and Nobles. I love bookstores. I was in a Barnes and Noble and I came across The 4 Hour Body on the table. And I picked it up and I think I read like 200 pages sitting in there. And I was like, I'm going to feel like an asshole if I don't buy this. So I bought the book. I went home and I said, wow, how cool that this guy can be a New York Times bestseller by literally just self-experimenting on his health and writing about it. And you can use this self-experimentation to bring across this very authentic and natural humility where you start asking for help from people who are really good at teaching. And I said, what an amazing opportunity to continue to do all these things myself. And so, kind of from start to finish, I started applying a lot of these kind of like self experimentation techniques in my own life. And what I noticed when we were in these corporate environments, when I was still working in the corporate environment, that all these things I was trying on myself were very novel at the time. Like everybody wasn't on Calm and Headspace. There weren't a ton of healthy food offerings in these businesses. People were not taking off at lunch and going to work out. There were not gym memberships being offered as perks. The curve on what is now widespread available to people was not there. And it seems almost crazy to think like, oh, well, these businesses like didn't come with any of these perks. It wasn't okay to take a break to go work out. You didn't do team happy hours, like doing something active or healthy rather than just drinking. It was like all of our happy hours were just consuming as much alcohol as possible. And so when we were doing this, those resources weren't just ubiquitous. So the main message that we were getting across was like, hey, there's stress present here that's not being dealt with and that's not being talked about from the corporate level. The ways to deal with that stress were like team happy hours that were being paid for or taking a little bit of time off. Now I think there's like mental health days. People are just getting days off just to like take care of your mental health. And it's being messaged around like do something peaceful and active for yourself instead of working. Like that was our mental health day was like Sunday before you went back to working, 50 to 75 hours a week. And I think that our main message at the time, the goal for us was to communicate across that this environment is stressful in a way that you can't perceive. You didn't have a Whoop band yet. You didn't have an Aura ring yet to check your HRV in the workplace. These environments that you spend the most time in, more time than you spend with your spouse, with your kids, at this workplace is inherently an environment that is not conducive to your best health. And regardless of how much money you make now, you will never make up for that. You can't pay for that back later. So we need to do something about this now. I'm really happy that there are people that love doing taxes. Like we need help with it. I am not one of those people. So, but I understand those people, and I understand how you could like it. I didn't dislike working in the environment I was in. And everyone always says this, but the people at those jobs are extremely smart. The people that work in professional services firms, like the average intelligence level is very, very high. There's a high bar to entry just needing to go through the testing and the schooling to even get credentialed. And I was watching a lot of these people just not practice very healthy habits. So for them, it was really, hey, let's present this list of kind of new and novel ideas to them. Let's help them synthesize that in a way that really helps improve their lifestyle in the context of we know that this is your job and these are the things that come along with it. And how do we make those two things fit together better? That was that was the main delivery. And we've been teaching Ikigai for a really long time now. And that's essentially what that model is. It's just taking the things that you like, taking the things you can be paid for, which you may not necessarily love all the time, and finding some other elements to add in there that make holistically something that you can feel very purposeful about and you can be healthy doing. That's the goal of almost every talk that we give, corporate or not.
So when you're talking about that, there's obviously multiple elements. So you've got fitness, you've got mental well-being, you've got nutrition, you've got just, habits in general on how to optimize your time, how to optimize your energy levels, things that we're all thinking about doing. And there's so much information out there that we can get information overload. And when you have an excess of things you can do, sometimes it just creates that paradox of choice and you end up just doing nothing. So some of these habits that you were teaching them, I think are definitely probably still applicable to the average person. So what were some of these things that you were teaching them that the everyday person could implement into their own lives? Maybe they're that person working, 8 to 12-hour days, like those 9 to 5s, and they've maybe got a family, maybe they're trying to make more time to go to the gym, they're trying to formulate a side hustle, whatever it is. What are some of these habits that you were teaching these corporate high performers that the average person could take and apply to their lives?
Yeah. Let's get the first like very cliche part of this out of the way, in which like self-care is the most important care, because if you fall apart, everything else falls apart. Our body and brain is extremely talented at overriding that thought. So parents are very good at taking care of their children, um, and not great at self-preservation at the same time, right? That sacrifice seems very necessary and they're very willing to take it. The problem is that at some point there's a shelf life to that. And I don't want to use fear as the driver, but those things come home to roost later in life. Your short-term negation of your own health will cause long-term issues. Sometimes they'll cause short-term issues as well. And those are a little bit easier to deal with. But the tough part comes a lot later in life. And sometimes it's even just the habit formation or the lack thereof that causes the biggest difficulty. If you lack strength, it's really hard to begin strength training after the age of 35, 40, 50, 60, 70. It gets a lot more difficult. Without that, and without some of this early on health, we're getting increased obesity rates, which is obvious, but also increasing neurodecline and cognitive diseases, dementia, Alzheimer's, of which my family has had a lot of affliction with. And I think if you want to incentivize somebody to do something immediately, you have to change their state. You have to make them feel different. And that domino is pulled in a variety of ways. I always tailor every talk, especially one-on-one, obviously, but even in groups, to the audience I'm speaking to. If you're in a group of hard charging, really high performers, you have to change their state in a different way than an extremely overworked parent who stays at home, who isn't in and out of a gym, who doesn't have a ton of social friction all day long, and is wiped out. That person doesn't need CrossFit. That person doesn't need an ultra marathon on the weekend. They need 30 minutes of peace and quiet. And my addition to them is, after you try the glass of wine or the beer to just like sit down and unwind, let's try something with some sustainability and some longevity to it to help you better handle the stress, so that when you get to that moment of relaxation, you have more energy and more willingness to try something new. Go out into the world and apply some of your passion, or start a business from home, or work out for the first time in maybe a really long time. I think that some of those strategies from a broad level are all boiled down to just concepts. So concepts are few, strategies, tactics are many. The first of which of those concepts is prioritizing health into your schedule with an equal amount of importance as the rest of your daily tasks, including your job, your kids, any of the other professional or personal obligations that you may have. Now, people say, oh, I'm out of time and I'm out of this. Unfortunately, without straight up calling you lazy to your face, you just simply didn't prioritize it as important. Even starting with 30 seconds midday of just closing your eyes and taking a few very conscious breaths allows you to take some responsibility and take some ownership control over what's going on between here and here, to rewrite some of the script you're telling yourself. So I am trying to help people prioritize their health by going on offense. Most people are playing defense. They're saying, well, look at my work schedule, look at my list of personal obligations. Where would you like me to work out in that? And I'm like, here's what's going to happen. Instead of just trying to play defense from all of the meetings on your schedule, let's insert a little offense in there and drive a little 5 minute wedge. And in this wedge, here's what we're going to do. And then next week, we're going to drive 2 5 minute wedges in there, and you're going to block that out in advance. You're going to wake up 5 minutes earlier. You're going to take 5 more minutes at lunch. You're going to whatever the tactic might be. And we're just going to prioritize a little bit of health in there. And eventually that conversation grows from on my most compassionate end to the person who only has 5 minutes to the ultra high performer who's like, I'm all in, optimize my whole life, in which I'm spending hours a day thinking about the way I think, the way I move, the way I interact. It's really that prioritization game first, then creating adherence to that, and then creating consistency over a very long period of time and allowing that person to track whatever the habit is. I like using exercise as a domino because it can do a lot to make up for sometimes lack of sleep. I think building strength and endurance in the gym or with physical activity has a ton of carryover into the rest of your life and can create a massive momentum effect that nutrition naturally follows. I think it creates some physical and mental resiliency that then some type of meditation or just general self awareness practice, whether that might be journaling, taking a walk, sitting down and just reflecting on how you feel and like doing some emotional identification once in a while, the domino effect of exercise on the rest of those can be really powerful. And so some of the tactics to directly answer your question is first, let's find some priority, design your life to drive these little self-care wedges into your schedule. How do we adhere to those and make those extremely easy and simple to understand why you're doing it? Then create consistency over time. So adhering to that over a long period of time, eventually allowing those things to grow. And as you gain momentum, we thoughtfully add the next layer of commitment. And things that once took a ton of brain power are now subconscious and they're just a part of your daily routine. And I think you let that grow in exercise and nutrition and sleep management and stress management. Then we get into the deeper stuff about where do I go to cultivate an environment? Who do I go for people I need advice from? Where do I go when I have these entrepreneurial thoughts? Where do I go when I want to start something new? Whatever that might be, I think the wheels start turning with people when they feel stronger, when they have more energy, when they feel like the best version of themselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. They feel very connected and purposeful. Then, we blow the top off. But it's just funny how small most people need to start with that. And that's usually what we begin with.
So taking a look, thinking about your daily life, you have clients, you've got a wife, you've got your own health. I know you're still competitive yourself. You have the retreats, you've got a lot of things going on. So what does a typical day in the life look like for you to optimize your energy levels, your performance, to be present, to stay focused, and to be able to pour into all these other areas of life that you have?
Yeah. Well, it's looking a little different now than it will when I go back to the US. And actually, it's been really highlighting being here. I've been training at the same times every single day while I've been in Australia. Um, it's by mid morning here, the US is offline. And so I normally take very early meetings and calls. And then after that, my schedule is pretty open from like time restricted obligations that is not present when I'm at home when I have clients all day. Um, my body has been responding to a consistent schedule so well that it's definitely something I'm going to try and carry back home. So right now in Australia, I'm basically waking up. It's early calls and meetings from like 6 to about 8:30ish in the morning. I'm training almost every day about 8:30. We can go through that in a minute. After the first training, I come back, I cook food at home every time right after, which is awesome. Not eating, standing up, running between things, but like sitting down. We have a nutritionist friend who has a great concept called table, plate, chair. I sitting down at a table, sitting at a chair with my food on a plate, and able to enjoy meal number one in the day, which has been great. Um, and then after that, have been creating big time blocks of kind of tasks to get done. So I'm doing a lot of my creative work in the morning. And then in the afternoon and later in the day, I do all of my kind of productivity admin tasks that will prep clients or things for the next day a little bit later in the day. And usually adding some second form of movement in there. um, the things that I've been doing here in Australia to really take advantage of that, and something that I don't have as much of at home, but it's my fault for not making time and going to do it, has been combining fitness with in-person community. I need to work out with other people. Um, really dislike exercising alone. The one caveat to that being more endurance based activities. So like running or exploring, stuff like that, especially if I'm trail running or like in mountains, I love being by myself. But every morning showing up to a gym with people I really like spending time with and I look forward to has been an amazing start to every single day. So that's been a massive new boost for me. Like on the money, my body is used to working out at this time. It's used to being social. That is an amazing dose of fitness, community, and a little bit of competition for me very early on in the day. Like that's number one, protect that. The second thing has been consistent eating schedules around some of these movement practices. My body is getting used to like a normal caloric intake rather than that being a bit more erratic for me. And then I've been using the afternoons to do something a little more exploratory. I'm a huge fan of doing as many different types of activities that my strength training will support. So I could go for an afternoon run. I might surf. We're straight across the street from the beach, which is great. Um, I'll take a walk on our coastal walk. I have a Go Ruck backpack, which I throw a plate and sandbag in and just go for an hour long walk. And that I always pair with some type of learning. So I've got a pot like in my earphones, got podcast on, got an audio book on, doing some type of, maybe I'm thinking through something and just kind of making mental notes. And I've got my phone out, just throwing voice memos while I run. Um, those sort of two bookends of movement, and I'm getting plenty of nutrition, plenty of adequate rest in the middle, which has been awesome to allow me to take advantage of that. Those have been an unbelievable mood change for me. And like one of those is outside, sunny, amazing view. Sometimes I'm in the ocean, which is super healing to me, and I absolutely love that. So those two things have been great. And then um, we've been traveling a bunch, but when my wife's here too, we've been able to do so much more like socially together, and might be taking a walk down to the beach, taking a walk around our neighborhood, going out to dinner, something like that. Those kind of three things have been just like the great start, middle, and end to my day while I'm in Australia. When I go back home, I have to fight a little harder in my schedules to just have more going on to create some of that time. Something I'm looking forward to is trying to invite more people consistently over for different types of exercise. So just like finding more run buddies for things we're doing, finding more lifting buddies, finding more sauna and ice barrel buddies, and setting that type of social environment up a little bit more frequently. Here, it's so easy to organize around activity that you could find somebody that wants to swim straight across Bondi Beach from one headland to the other, which is a kilometer swim, to running to gym to boxing. Um, and I've been in that kind of second movement session, also adding, I just started jujitsu last week. And I've been pairing that with a little bit of the boxing work I've been doing. And that has been a super fun outlet for some strength stuff I'm doing in the gym. So I think, my long story short, my big answers to that question are pairing movement with being around other people and taking more breaks to just kind of like stop and appreciate where I'm at. I think it would be foolish not to do that. And when I go back home, trying to implement some more of those midday rather than just like going from one thing to the next without any type of gap between that, I think is will be really important.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important too. Just in the society that we live in, I'm guilty of this too. Just constantly trying to do, and fit as much into one day as we can. And when we see that white space on the calendar, sometimes you just like, oh, what should I do? Like you have a million
Yeah.
things that you could do that you should be doing. But I wanted to kind of put a pin there on nutrition just because I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with. For me, nutrition's always been like really fascinating. Like I got my nutrition coaching certification really more so just because I wanted to use that knowledge and information on myself when I was playing football in college. And it led me down a path of helping people do it as well. But has it been difficult for you to kind of like adapt in terms of diet? Do you have the same kind of foods that you typically eat in the US? And what is how do you structure like a day of eating for the way that you train and just the way that you live your life?
Yeah. That's a great question. Nutri Yeah, we could do hours on this
That yeah,
topic.
that's a whole series. That's a whole series.
I think nutrition is feels complicated because everyone wants to be so dogmatic about it. I'm paleo, I'm keto. This isn't good for you. This isn't good for you. Well, this is good for me. Well, this tastes good and I like it. This makes me feel good. Nutrition is so individualized that I have seen people eat a carnivore diet and all their biomarkers improve. And I have seen research on people doing that, being like, I felt horrible. My cholesterol went through the roof. My energy dipped and dropped. I've talked to people who are vegan who are like, this just makes me feel good. So this is the reason I'm doing it. And I've talked to other people who are vegetarian who are like, yeah, I'm just really low on energy, struggling to get some protein in my diet. I don't feel like I eat enough. And I'm like, light bulb, like you need a steak. You need some chicken and you need a steak and you need to like feel those nutrients pump your body up. I think if we start from a place where nutrition is individualized and you need to take time to figure out what works best for you, everyone would be better off. There are a couple people I really like that I think break some of these things down. Max Lugreve is really good, I think, at providing very plain language advice without being too dogmatic. I think some people, not him, but I think some people are a little bit like they're kind of bullies about it. They almost bully you into thinking that their way is the best way, and you've seen a ton of people codify their nutrition advice into things like Weight Watchers, Whole 30. I think a lot of these provide some really nice structure for people. Um, and whether or not they work for you, the structure is what works. And so for me, when I think about it, I'm trying to build a structure of nutrition that works really well for me, that balances my goals. Currently, which I think that context is really important before I give my answer about my nutrition so that people realize why I'm doing it. I am very active, very on the go, and I eat to live. I love sitting down to a really long dinner with people, but I like it because I'm sitting down to a really long dinner with people. Um, Outside of like sushi, I could eat the same thing every day for every meal. And I am very much, Michael Chernow is a friend. I'm very much also a creature of habit. Um, I really like his oatmeal actually for meal one is very good. But I'm very much a creature of habit and I need repetitive structure. And the reason why I do that is because I rely on the way that that food makes me feel. And it also makes me look the way I want to look. And so that's a very obvious structure that works very well for me. And I think about my nutrition in just sort of a couple easy phases. Number one is, am I choosing high quality foods? So, where can I get those high quality foods from? For most people, that's where they should start. They should sit down, they should look at their plate and go, was this the best choice available? I heard Kelly Starrett say that really early on one time. He was like, just make the best choice available. He's like, if pizza is the best choice available for your kid, you need to feed them. They need calories. If you could feed them something better, you should. It's almost negligent not to. We just have all these crazy emotional overrides with food, cultural, social pressure, whatever that might be, nostalgia, things that taste good. Like I love Wonder Bread with butter and Sprite with crackers when I don't feel good. It's like, well, that's what you were being fed when you were 6 and didn't feel great, right? None of which are healthy options for when you're sick or what you should be eating. So I think like first step for most people is food quality. Can I make better decisions? What's the best decision available? Doing a review of that, um, of your total eating, being a little bit more aware of what you're eating. Second thing is then, am I eating adequate protein? And that's the most important thing for me, and something that I semi consistently track. I have a pretty good feel for how much is correct. I err on the conservative side of just a gram per pound of body weight. If I'm trying to preserve muscle and lose a little bit of fat, which happens around times where I'm starting some endurance stuff or just trying to lean out a little bit, that protein number might go up a little bit more. Just like a conservative way to add calories that won't have an adverse effect, or as adverse of effect. So that's step number two. I build all of my meals around my protein source. So breakfast, I've actually been eating a lot of meal one from Michael in Creatures of Habit, combined with um, eggs. For lunch, I basically am just like a chicken and rice fan. That's post training. And so I'm just fueling with protein and carbohydrates 2 to 1. And I'll get to like why in a second. Um, for a snack somewhere in there, I usually just turn to a protein shake. This is my on the go flexible option that I could flex anytime throughout the day. If I happen to be out for a meal or meeting somebody for food, I won't consume that protein shake and I'll just eat another smaller meal. And then for dinner, I alternate steak and salmon for the most part. And I'll build like a little bit of salad around that. The third kind of like layer to nutrition. So first, it's just, is this the best choice available? Higher quality foods. Protein number macro comes second, making sure you hit a minimum or a floor with that. Third is the mix of carbohydrates to fat. This is where nutrition starts to become highly individualized and goal dependent. Um, my current goal is to sustain a really high level of output. In any given week, I'm lifting 3 to 4 times, doing 2 to 3 conditioning sessions, running 2 to 3 times, rolling 2 times, boxing once with random surf sessions thrown in there. So I'm in an active session 10 to 12 times a week. I also burn a ton of calories at rest. So my calorie consumption has to be pretty high. My That's a performance goal. My aesthetic goal is also to hold on to some of the muscle that I just kind of came off a little bit more of a phase where I was just sort of doing what felt good, but really making sure my strength training was a primary goal, adding a little bit of mass. I would like to preserve that. So I also want to make sure that I'm getting enough protein to preserve that, but also enough carbohydrates to not only solve for the number of sessions I'm doing in terms of performance nutrition, but also carbohydrates in terms of starting to build and repair some of the damage I'm doing to my body to actually preserve some of the mass. And fat is a filler number based on total calories. And those two numbers fluctuate up and down, the carbohydrates and fats, just depending on what phase I'm in. I'm moving into a phase where I want enough carbohydrates to make sure I can train and sustain this level of output, but not so many that I just errantly add mass that I don't want. And then fat is a filler number. And so total calories is kind of what I'm adjusting up and down. Protein levels just never change. So if you were to do the math backwards, you'd find total calories for calories at rest plus activity level, which is just an educated guess. You get total calories, you remove the protein calories, you get carbohydrates and fats. Those two levels are adjusted, goal dependent for your performance goals mixed with your aesthetic goals. And then the last piece of that is just messing with some timing. People should not go there until they have graduated from being able to assess on the fly without a ton of thought process my 1 through 4. So before you ever get to, well, is fasting good for me? Should I go keto? Do I need to eat this at this time, or is it better to eat this before or after? Yeah, there's a better choice, but the best choice is just adherence to a consistency point in which you earn the right to ask complicated questions. At the start, you don't get that right? Like you need to spend a lot of time thinking about this before you start asking the complicated questions. Let's ask the 3 good questions that will solve 95% for 95% of your answers. And so on the nutrition for that, was intermittent fasting for a really long time, and I've actually in the past couple of years really gotten off that due to the volume of exercise and especially wanting to put on a little bit of mass. It's hard to get as many calories as I need in a compressed time window, so I've extended that time window a lot. And I tend to stick to like pretty consistent meals in order to answer all of those questions. So I'm happy to go into like what those foods exactly are, but I think that's a pretty good like short condensed answer to how I think about that process. And the easiest way I simplify that for myself is get a general sense of how much overall food I need to eat, make sure I'm hitting my protein levels every day, and then doing my best minute to minute to not make bad choices, to not make suboptimal food choices.
So for a guy your height, your weight, your training level, how many calories roughly do you think you're taking in each day?
Yeah, I'm 5'10" and change, just about 5'11". I weigh probably low 170s right now. I haven't weighed myself in a while, probably getting closer to about 170. Um, and I'm keeping my calories pretty lean at like 2,500. I think that for full optimal performance, if I didn't care at all what I looked like, I'd bump that up above 3,000 for sure. And I'd probably double or triple my carbohydrate intake. I thread the line between enough. I probably don't get enough carbohydrates to justify the amount of movement I'm doing week to week. Um, I don't have any direct races or performance goals on my schedule. So I can afford to be like, I'm a little bit fatigued today. I'm just going to back off, eat a little bit more, and I'll be fine tomorrow. I don't have any structure that I need to stick to where I need to override that. So I think for different people at different times working on different goals, your margin of error will fluctuate. If you are really trying to make a drastic change in your life, your discipline needs to be buttoned up way more consistently. If you're just doing something casually and trying to figure this type of stuff out, just extend your runway. And whether I'm working with a client or myself, I always just say triple your timeline. If you think it should take you 1 month, it's going to take you 3. If you're doing whole 30, do whole 90. And when you inevitably fail or deviate from your plan, which will happen, hopefully, if you're doing whole 90, it's at day 50. And there you go. You just did 20 extra days than you would have done had your goal been whole 30. And I don't want to like pick on or zone in on whole 30, but people get so fixated on these like short-term changes that then they reach wherever they were going and the wheels fall off. And if we actually think about it as more of an infinite game, you're playing this for a lifetime. What are you doing to make changes that will take a lifetime? Isn't it worth spending a couple months getting really educated on this stuff so that you can go your whole life armed with better information? To me, it's negligent not to do that. It is just insane the number of things that, good or bad, will occur based on your decisions now, because they continuously make habits that will last a really long time. And the longer you go, the harder they are to break. So for me, I want to just get into good habit formation and good structure and manipulate from there. And I am willing to make that take a really long time. So back to your question about just number of calories, I'm willing to play with 23, 2400 to 3500, 4000, because I know that the data I get from these cycles, I can return to at any minute. Oh, I want to put on mass. Well, here's how much. I have a journal of it and I know the foods I was eating. So just go back and do that again. It's like a very Tim Ferriss like self experiment. I have thesis. Here's what I want to do. Here's the variables I'm willing to change. I'm going to document this process. Every time I want to come back to it, here's my log of stuff that I did. I have photos to prove it. I've got race results to show you how that translated into performance. Um, and I can contextualize that with, oh, at that time I was training for a marathon, or oh, at that time I was training for high rocks, or I was training for long mountain bike rides, whatever that might be. And you match the performance goals with your aesthetic goals, which nobody's getting around. Everybody has something they want to focus on, um, even just for general body composition for good health. And the context of longevity, performance, and aesthetics should drive a lot of that self experimentation. You figure out where you want to fall inside that triangle, and you eat and train according to what's going to get you there. And so that to me is driving my calorie conversation. It's driving my macro split. It's driving the types of foods I'm eating, the supplements I'm taking, wherever you want to kind of like drive that discussion with yourself or with your coach. um, that context is really important.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I just came off a block of training to attempt to go sub 3 in the marathon. Didn't happen. And then I just did an ultra this past weekend. So I've been eating like and I'm about 6 foot, like 195 pounds. So I've been eating like 4,000 calories for the past like
There we
couple of
go.
months.
Big dog, gotta eat.
Dude, got to. So I'm actually kind of excited to not be shoving, 500 grams of carbs in my face every day. It's
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
difficult, kind of difficult, and also not great for cognitive function at times. But we could definitely chop it up about nutrition all day. One thing that I really admire about you and Brett and what you guys have been doing is your work with youth wellness. So where does that passion stem from, and what are the steps that you've taken to really inspire and empower this next generation?
Yeah. Well, for all of the maybe for better or worse, we're so kind of ADD about all of our passion projects. We have added so many things because we keep identifying these needs in places and get so excited about helping that we just kind of start. So now we have this really wide breadth of projects that we're actually like very actively trying to slim down. And one of the areas that we have a huge focus in is kids wellness. And the passion for that came from the fact that there's a reason why we have careers teaching adults about wellness. And it's because these tools were not built as children. We were not armed with these strategies early on. They were not a common thread in school growing up. So kids are going through without the ability to identify things like stress, where we grew up playing sports in gym was my favorite class. Wasn't, maybe a little unique there, but gym was my favorite class. I loved movement. Gym is the most, or physical education is the most failed subject in school in Illinois. And we got some alarming figures about the spend on wellness for a kid in CPS and in some of these school districts. The fact that physical education outside of recess is not a mandatory part of every single day at school, to me, is mind blowing. We put kids in a desk seated for hours on end and expect them to learn. We as adults hate that. And you're adults with the discipline and like know how to override that, right? We talked about that earlier about overriding some self-preservation and some of these health habits in lieu of whatever other goals we're trying to focus on. Kids don't have that perspective. Think about how much easier and sharper you are after exercise. In You're asking 6 to 14-year-olds to sit down and pay attention to whatever subject you're trying to feed them without running them ragged first is just an insane thought to me. So the passion project started as more of a give back when we started helping a friend running a business to volunteer in schools. And we taught a yoga class to a group of second and third graders. And I was expecting a complete chaos. I was expecting nobody to know what we were talking about, nobody to pay attention. And we were leading just this gentle breathing exercise. And there's a different way to corral kids. You got to do funny little things to get their attention. But watching a 6-year-old sit down, close their eyes, and meditate for 10 minutes in a row without making a sound was life altering. It was like this 6-year-old understands stress and feels stress. And they also have the ability to do something with that. They actually have the emotional awareness to step back and say, this is what the stress is actually doing to me. Now, the answers come out very cute and funny. We will ask, oh, how did this make you feel? And people are like, oh, I felt amazing. I'm feeling like just calm. And we were like, when would you use this outside of here? And they're like, well, when my brother or my sister is mad at me or my parents are mad at me, I'll just go into my room and close my eyes, breathe for a little while. And then I come back and I'm a little bit happier. And I'm like, if we could get adults to do that, like, are you kidding? That just came out of a 6-year-old's mouth. That was like nuclear to me. I was like, okay, every single 6-year-old on planet Earth needs to have that in their toolkit. It will change their life forever. We haven't even gotten to the fitness part yet. We haven't even gotten to any of that. Just that little nugget. And so we started volunteering a little more, teaching a little more. One of my old neighbors taught in a school, and I did a workshop for the teachers about the teachers managing their stress and about managing their classroom environment and how to implement that for kids. So I did this dual workshop where first half of it was for the teachers themselves because they definitely need it. And I could never do this job all day long. Like you guys are saints. So I did it for the teachers first. And then I said, here are a couple ways that I might suggest that you bring this into your classroom. Selfishly for you, but also for the benefit of your kids. And then they asked us to come back and do an assembly. So this was the first time Brett and I had been in a big auditorium. We had 200 kindergarten through second graders, and then 250 third through sixth. And that day when Brett and I, with no early childhood education, formal teaching, just yoga and meditation, were able to help an assembly full of people, kids, participate in like yoga and activity and breathing and come out of there like coming up and giving us hugs and being like, what's your YouTube channel? We want to watch at home. that was like a big light bulb moment for us that this needed to be a more regular thing. And so since we've actually built a digital program, um, our mutual friend Antonio is actually currently helping us a little bit with that. And Brett was just in New York teaching to Antonio's elementary school, getting involved in some of the New York schools with it. We've been to Brett's elementary school out in Western Springs in LaGrange, and they've been doing our program for actually 2 full years. So we have a digital offering of yoga, meditation, some movement breaks combined with a daily habit. The teachers can use that program as a curriculum or as ad hoc resources to run a 30-second to 5-minute meditation or movement break in their classroom at any time. They just load the video, put it on the screen. Kids follow along with no further instruction from what we're doing. And then we've also combined that with a little bit of the in-person, the assembly work. It's like that's the most fun. It's like getting in front of these kids. And I think full circle, we've realized, the passion came from, wow, we can actually just change a kid's life. The full circle realization came about when we realized, well, if this was a part of the curriculum and every kid had these tools, conversation we'd be having with adults now would be very different. And in my mind, the world would be a calmer, more self-aware, socially aware place with better emotional identification, whether we're talking about SEL or Castle as K through 6, or whether we're talking about doing something with your, anxiety, depression, whatever that might be, whatever these feelings of stress, however they might manifest themselves as us to adults. Um, we'd have a very different like amount of social friction, and hopefully can contribute to lowering a lot of very dangerous trends we're starting to see as an adult, from depression, anxiety to just generalized loneliness, um, lack of close relationships. So I think that's the pipe dream, is that we get some of this into actual curriculum, and health and wellness as a class is just as important as math and science. I personally, I think it is. Our mathematicians and scientists, if they were healthier, their output would be higher. And that, to me, higher work product has downstream effects for millions or billions of people. And that could start with just some self-care from them. And if you teach that at a very early age, man, kids pick stuff up and they don't forget it. And if we taught health and wellness as a skill or a set of skills, just the future, to me, that seems like something worthwhile for us to be focused on and working on.
Dude, that is so amazing. I love that. I'm all on board with that. I think that, fitness doesn't have to be your entire life. You don't have to be, working out twice a day, training for hours upon end and things like that, but rather it just becomes a part of you and it becomes a tool to kind of combat everything else that happens in life. It becomes a tool to help amplify the quality of work and everything you do. Like you had mentioned earlier, like working out or doing something hard, like before you go and go to work or do anything like that. Like I literally went and did some movement and took a cold shower before this because I know now, learning about the science of how the brain and the body work, that you do something like that, then your focus is going to be enhanced. So learning things like that, and just teaching them to close their eyes and just take a few deep breaths, like that is so freaking powerful. And I want to, my next question off of that is like, what do you think is the benefit of meditation where you're just sitting down, closing your eyes, and unguided meditation versus using something like Calm or Headspace or one of the more, YouTube, anything, just like a more guided meditation?
Yeah. Um, First, I with what you just said, I completely agree. I think we're in a really weird state of people feeling like they need to add so much. Um, I feel slightly complicit in pushing the narrative on occasion that we need to be driving forward all the time. I feel like I've done a better job, and I think people that know my coaching style, I'm I'm pretty fair in my assessment of what you have going on and like really what you need. It might be kicking ass or might be a hug. Um, and this directly will relate to your next question. Fitness to me, like meditation or like any type of self-care practice, is one of two things. It's a way in or it's a way out. I was just rewatching, I think it's called Fight World on Netflix, but Frank Grillo, who's one of my favorite actors, goes through different um, countries and like cultural phenomenons of fighting. And one of the first episode, he goes to Tepito, which is a subdivision, to my understanding, in Mexico City. It's pretty rough. And boxing is a way out for a lot of those kids. Sports is a way out for a lot of really tough situations for kids. It's a way to not fall into really bad things going on around them in an environment they were born into and have no control over. Fitness, on the other end, though, can be a way in. If you find yourself lazy, lacking motivation, lacking drive, lacking relationships, lacking discipline, lacking the urge to drive yourself more, it can be a way into that. It's self-imposed challenges. So if you don't have those environmental, familial, whatever that might be, inherent challenges in your life, to use fitness or self-awareness practices, meditation, breath work as a way out, can also be a way in. And whether you're going out or in, we arrive right back at one place, and that's the ability to tap into your own self-awareness. This is something that Calm, Headspace, Whoop, or a Ring will never allow you to do. Oftentimes, we use technology as a crutch for things that are available right between your eyeballs. I think it would be not smart to avoid technology. It's an amazing way to facilitate a lot of this behavioral change because I think it passively allows us to measure and monitor this. That's what Whoop and Oura Ring do. They're constantly collecting data from you. They spit it back to you in a format and in a platform. It's really easy to read. And then they store that data so that you get a pattern of data, which then you get to look at, analyze, and make changes with. I'll leave the fact that 90% of the people that wear them, maybe more, probably never actually do anything with the data. They just use it to feel good. I don't care if you've got, your Apple Watch on or a Garmin or whatever you're doing. I think a lot of that can just be a tool to remind you to tap into more of these practices. Something like Calm and Headspace can do a great job of guiding you into a place where you don't have to do a lot of the early work alone to build the habit. So you can bypass some discipline or self education by just sitting down, putting headphones on, pressing play on the app. They couldn't make it any easier, and that is amazing. But if you're using technology to bypass your own self awareness tools, you're doing yourself a disservice because the most accessible, simplistic way to change your health is by monitoring what's going on in your own body and in your own brain and being able to assess and fix that on your own, on the fly, anywhere, anytime. And then to me, it's using technology to optimize that or to get an accurate reading of how you feel versus what's actually happening. So in fitness, we use RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, a lot. How do you feel doing this? This run should feel like a 5 out of 10. In the data, that should actually correlate with zone two. And that for me might be a heart rate of 135 to 150. I know that because I've been wearing my watch, which I won't look at. I'll say, oh, I feel like this is how hard I'm working. I'll look down, and that will correlate directly with the heart rate. The better I am naturally able to tap into what's happening physiologically, the better I am going to operate because the faster and easier I can make those decisions, even when my tech fails, or Garmin runs out of battery, I don't have it available to me. I'm in a very stressful situation and I can't just take my headphones out and sit down and play a 20-minute calm meditation. It might be I need to lock the bathroom door for like 2 seconds before I give a huge speech, or what you're watching right now with NBA Finals on, guy can't sit down and listen to a calm meditation before he goes to the free throw line. Can't look down at his whoop and be like, oh shit, my heart rate's this amount. I need to do this breathing exercise and I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes. Like, let's let everyone wait on me. Like, no, they need to tap into their physiology right away and be able to calm down, amp up on a dime, tech free. Watch a lot of very elite athletes do it all the time. Seemingly these like speakers and things that get thrown off or when something happens, like just watch them adapt to it. It's a practice response to some of that stress. That's what sitting down with your own thoughts tech free allows you to do better. Then do it some with technology, then match how you go between each of those and figure out what works best for you. But I think we should always return to that very natural state where we don't need any tools and be able to tap into that, and be very truthful and honest with how well we can do that on our own. And I think if there's any glaring hole in that, that's a weakness that you need to identify and fix. Whether technology is the momentum push over the edge for you to be able to start doing that better, great. But eventually that's I think something that we need to tap into. And I actually right now going back, sitting near me, going back and reading Meditations, which is like Marcus Aurelius's journal, which has been one of the most famous kind of Stoic texts now. And in it, the quote that kind of like went right at me at the beginning was he's like, "Oh, people seek retreat all the time." It's just funny because we run retreats. They want to go to a place that makes them feel a certain way and they want to escape from it when the best retreat is in your own mind. And when your strategies in your own mind are easy and simple and you can turn to them anytime you need, you got it all right between your ears. Every time you need it, it's sitting right there. And you can reuse that without needing to go to a different place, without needing headphones and an app, without needing any calorie tracker or heart rate tracker. All those things are great, but we gotta tap back into the most simplistic and easy strategy you have available to you, and that's just general self-awareness. And that might start with breathing on the couch. That might start with just pausing during a workout and being like, how do I feel right now? Um, and I think tapping into a lot of that naturally, like that to me is extremely important that every single person explore at some level.
100%. I think you said it right there. They're great tools, but at the end of the day, if you can't tap into your own self-awareness, then, you know, you kind of need to take a step back. Like I was wearing my Whoop for a year, and after a year I was like, okay, I I, I don't want to get up and have to look at my phone to see, oh, I wonder what my recovery is going to look like today. I bet my HRV is going to be lower. It's a great tool to learn more about your body, but at the end of the day, you have to be the best assessor of your assessor. I think that's a word of your of your own health and well-being. Dude, I'm curious with everything that you have going on in life right now, what is the most exciting thing? What excites you the most about life right now?
I love that question. Something that we started to ask a lot of people. I think it's a better question than like, oh, how are you doing? It's like, oh, just tell me something about your passion. Or tell me something that's getting you
Right,
excited. I love
right.
it. Um, Besides being in Australia and being able to surf out my front door, that's pretty immediate. Um, what's exciting to me personally has been just like exploring something that's really new. Um, with my wife, something that's just like, it's just ours. It's a really cool opportunity. And it's allowed me to flip a lot of the routines and things I was very focused on at home a little bit on its head to kind of review from afar. It's like working on your business and not working in it. And doing that, I'm really excited about the relationships that I'm building. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be on your podcast and connect with you. I'm grateful for a lot of the shared friends that we have that are providing a lot of opportunities. And I am going all in on that relationship building for the next 12 to 18 months, saying yes to a ton of events and to helping people out, um, saying yes to supporting friends that are doing really well and um, helping support their businesses and watching them grow. Um, I think I'm in this like great relationship part of my life where I am buying into that a lot. And I think a lot of the stuff that I want to do, a lot of the things I want to do, the businesses I want to build are going to be byproducts of that. Um, there are a lot of some exciting like investment projects. We've started some exciting retreat things we'd like to do, some great momentum with our kids program. We built a men's uh, group in Chicago called Movement, and we're selling out 50-person events in 10 minutes, giving guys a space to come in and work out really hard and then talk about things that are challenging to them and creating this really tight knit community of men in Chicago that is missing. And as I, look at all of those things, they're all built on great relationships that I have that I want to put more time into. And so that's what's really exciting to me. Um, has been some of the relationships I've made and what those relationships will allow me to do and how they make me feel and how they drive me. That's what I'm the most excited about right now for sure.
Yeah, dude. It's so cliche to say your network is your net worth, but it really is so true. And the older I get, the more I realize that like every good thing that happens is, a byproduct of the people and the relationships that I've cultivated in my life. So I'm grateful for having you on here as well. Grateful that we've connected. Um, Excited for the future here. And I know it's May 23rd, and I believe something pretty exciting opens up tomorrow on the 24th. So, tell me a little bit about, and tell the people listening, a little bit about the Live Better retreats, kind of what you guys have planned coming up, and how they could maybe get involved in those.
Yeah. So we're launching our 13th retreat back to El Salvador. It's our home base. This will be our ninth retreat there, and I think my 11th or 12th trip to El Salvador. It's a little home away from home now. But these retreats are just the rat. If you have been jiving with anything we've been talking about for the last hour and a half, it's that every day for 6 days in a row, surrounded by unreal people with a very warm, sunny ocean available to you 24 hours a day. Um, there our life's work gets poured into these retreats, and selfishly, like they're my favorite weeks of the year. I mean, being able to be surrounded by a group of people working on their fitness, their nutrition, but more than that, like really connecting on like a deep human level and having quality conversations for a week. We've had people start podcasts, switch careers, get in or out of relationships, commit to the next phase of their career, start side hustles, move cities, become roommates with other people who have been on the trip. Like the amount of downstream change in a positive way and the strength of the community that we've built around these retreats is, I die happy today. And the trips are so special to us. So they're the ones we host are our flagship international experience. They're 6 days, 5 nights. Everything's included except for your flight. Just got to get there. And every day you'll do a combination of workout on the beach. We're getting some resistant equipment down there this year, which would be awesome. So getting resistance strength training workouts on the beach every day. We do some type of meditation or performance breathing every day. So strategies to address all of the things we've been talking about here about self-awareness, using a little bit of tool and technology to facilitate that while we're at home. We give a one-on-one coaching session to everybody that comes. We have small group breakout discussions on everything from wellness lifestyle design to nutrition to fitness to the common thread of Ikigai, which we run through the week. Our other retreat co-founder, Ryland, just published his first book. And the theme of that book is freedom. He took portraits of people all around the US and then interviewed them and had them write down their definition of freedom on a note card and then published that. And he um, is one of the most emotionally intelligent people I've ever been around, and just an all-time human. And so he's constantly kind of coming out in and out of a lot of Brett's and I's kind of fitness and health and wellness talks in addition to the trip with a lot of that information and teaching some workshops around that. We have all our meals together, hanging out at night, drinking coffee in the morning, looking at sunrise, surf every day. Lesson comes of that surfing. It's pretty much like the perfect week if you are seeking a different type of vacation, a connection with some amazing people, and want to follow any of those little intuition butterflies in whatever direction that wants to take you, from starting a new fitness routine to side hustle to just figuring out how you want to spend your time a little bit better at home. It's the perfect place to do that. So that trip is launching. You can find that on livebetterco.org or just follow us on Instagram at livebetterco, and you'll see plenty of information on that. We've got space for about 25 people, and I think we launched it to our past retreat community, and I think like 10 to 15 people actually already jumped on that. So hopefully it's just a nice little squabble over the last 10 spots. But um, if you can't get in that one, we'll be running more domestic experiences from 1 day to 3 day weekends, and doing some pop-up stuff. And our goal is to run these retreats forever and just have them kind of follow around our life. At some point, maybe there'll be a bunch of little kids running around the resort at the same time we're hosting a retreat. But for now, there are these like wonderful weeks on the beach with some pretty incredible people in that community will last you a lifetime. Those friendships that are made on there are some of the most important to me in my life, which has been awesome. So want to make some friends as an adult. Come join us. Feel free to DM me, email me, whatever, with any questions about that. If you've got some, and there's an ability to just book a 10-minute kind of informational call with one of the three of us too, if anybody wants to chat through the trip or any of our retreats or events in general.
Freaking love that. I have not been on a retreat yet, but maybe this could be the one. I think this is my year. I was already talking to Antonio about it, so there's a high likelihood that you will see me in El Salvador. So anybody listening, freaking get on it. Let's kick it in El Salvador. But dude, I just want to say this was freaking epic. I am really grateful that we connected, and I'm so thankful for all the information that you shared today, and just taking a real like practical approach to health and wellness and just making it simple. Like, yes, you can get granular and you can optimize and things like that, but there are just a few key principles. Move, spend time with good people, eat good food. Like there's a few fundamental things that we can all do on a day-to-day basis to really live better. So, I want to jump into the quick three with you, which is just three quick questions to get to know a different side of Jason, and then we'll hop into our last question, and then I'll let you get on with your day. Over there is you got to get on with your day. I gotta get on with my evening. So, the first question is: I know you're in Australia right now, kind of living your best life, but if you could, let's say you're done in Australia, you could pop up and go anywhere in the world, where would you want to go?
Ooh, what time of year?
Yeah, when are you leaving? July? So
Yeah,
July.
July. Anywhere in the world, man, loaded question. So much time for activities. I would say something that's like a little more accessible to me, which I know is just an ultimate playground, is just plugging into the mountains in Colorado.
Mm.
I can find a laundry list of 30 things to do in a day that make me outrageously happy. So I would say either mountains of Colorado or the anywhere on Kauai would make me pretty happy in Hawaii.
What's one sport or activity that you've never tried that you have interest in?
Ooh, um, man, that is a great question. I love trying new stuff. I've tried a lot of things. Um, would have said skydiving, but I just did that 2 weeks ago. Um, that is a great question. Probably driving a race car.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, some type of race car driving for sure.
You an F1 guy?
I love F1. Get addicted to the dock. Now I'm all in. Yeah.
I haven't got on the F1 train yet, but
Oh, you need to
might
do
have
it.
to check it out.
Watch the doc. You'll be waking up Sunday mornings early and watching F1.
I'll join the crowd on that for
Yeah.
sure. Last one is, what is one book, podcast, resource that has had a positive impact on you over the past year?
Over the past year, the book You're Invited by John Levy, really, really good. It's about building community and the elements to community and how you build and foster trust. I think it's a very thoughtful, non manipulative way of thinking about how you engage with people. And that would be my book. My podcast, I've really been enjoying Peter Attia's The Drive. But I would say one kind of non-traditional um, audio book slash like it kind of reads as a like almost like a personal podcast that I've been listening to is The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life by Boyd Vardy. He is a tracker in Africa and he goes through and kind of reads it as like a little bit of a diary, a little bit of like a self-help. And my wife and I went to South Africa on our honeymoon and went on safari, and it was probably the coolest like 4 days of anything I've ever done. Um, I might go back to your first question and rewrite it to Africa on safari, but he talks about what it's like to do that as a job and threads these really cool life experiences and little life anecdotes in there. And I think it's a pretty cool book, and that's not one I think that a ton of people have heard of. So maybe I'll give a non-traditional answer and say the Lion Tracker's Guide to Life.
I like that. Never heard of it, but definitely gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, it's cool.
Jason, dude, my last question for you. This is the Pure Ambition podcast. When you hear those words, pure ambition, what do they mean to you, and how does that apply to your daily life?
Finding something that gives you purpose, giving a little bit of good positive energy behind it, and not quitting. I try not to think of ambition in the not giving it a negative connotation, which I think it can if you're too greedy about it. If you're willing to cast aside anything and everything to get where you want, I just watched Air. You're going to be eating dinner alone at the end. You're going to be at the mountaintop and you're going to look around and you're going to be solo. And that to me is like the negative connotation of ambition. The good part of ambition is like the grit required to not quit. And that to me is find something that's purposeful for you and apply good positive energy behind it over a very long period of time and use that to keep yourself from quitting. That to me is ambition. And I think in a very positive, sustainable way can be applied to anything in your life. You have ambition to be a better person, a better professional, a better spouse, a better partner, a better friend, parent, whatever it might be, teammate, whatever that might be. That to me is healthy ambition. Is my pure, in the sense, pure ambition.
Love it. Well, Jason, dude, this was epic. If people want to check out more of your content, they want to learn more about what you do, if they want to learn more about Live Better, where are you hanging out? Where can they check out your stuff?
Yeah, easiest place is everybody's business card. My Instagram, just at Jason Loebig, my first and last name, and then at Live Better Co is where we're launching all Live Better related activities. So anything personal training or story related, if you're listening to this and have questions, I love to connect with people and just share stories, help coach, run a marathon, or you want some training, happy to help, but also just happy to chop it up. And then at Live Better, when we're launching our events and retreats at Live Better Co, that's where anything on our event side is being launched. So one of those two places is perfect, and I'm on there every day.
Good stuff, man. Well, I appreciate you and everything you're doing, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in El Salvador soon.
My man, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Pure Ambition Podcast. Please leave a rating and review on the platform that you are listening, as it helps the show grow so that we can reach more people with the intent of empowering others to become the best versions of themselves and live a life worth remembering. If you're ready to take your fitness, mindset, and lifestyle to the next level, head to the link in the show notes and join the Pure Ambition group on Upspace for workouts, recipes, routines, and a community ready to help you thrive. See you in the next one.